Before we get started, I'm extremely proud to say that this episode of The Petrified Comedian was brought to you by 4x3. 4x3 is an independent media company creating comedy content on YouTube. This week, they dropped an episode of their podcast On a Related Note with professional soccer player JMI Tolkien and a comedy special by Vic Pena. Support independent comedy at youtube.com/@FOURXTHREE or by looking up 4x3 on YouTube. Enjoy the show. Sean Dolan is a comedian, entrepreneur, multi-instrumentalist, DJ, former reality show contestant, and bully conqueror based out of Texas. Having only started comedy a couple of years ago, he is the least experienced comedian I've spoken to so far, but that hasn't stopped him from making a name for himself in the world of comedy. Sean, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I start the podcast off with everyone just asking, if you could describe your comedy in 3 words, what would they be?
Can I curse?
Absolutely.
Fuck around and find out would be.
So, I'm noticing a theme.
in a nutshell. Also, there's some things in life you don't want to do, but you have to. So it's a little bit of that. You just have to do it. Generally, it's just about my life. I'm a new comedian, so I just started with significant events in my life and made light of them. And they say that tragedy plus time is comedy. So that's definitely where I've started in my career.
Yeah, I'm in a very similar situation. I just wrote my first 5 minutes and
you posted it?
Not yet. So after episode 10 of this podcast, which will be about a month and a half from now, I'm going to go up and do my first open mic. And then after that, it's going to be every 5 episodes. I'm going to do another one.
So you've written it?
I have written it.
Amazing.
I'm at the point where I'm just walking around with a hairbrush, doing it in the microphone. Here is my dog, by the way.
Hey, dog.
I'm at this point where I sort of feel like a lot of my funniest stories are not really things I want to try talking about first, but lots of things that maybe I don't want my family to know about right away, or stuff like that.
I hear you.
So I've tried to keep it relatively tame at the beginning, but I've got some stuff to dip into, certainly.
I've got a almost 12-year-old, and all of the kids at his junior high, all of them, many of them follow me on TikTok. So now I have this I have to be careful what I post. Not all of my jokes can go on TikTok now because of that. So it is kind of that's a weird part of it, where your family and friends and some of the sources of a lot of that comedy, you have to kind of be careful. You don't have to, but it helps at Thanksgiving dinner if you're more careful.
I was about to say, it depends on what you want your relationship to be like with those people.
Totally. I remember my mom went to my first comedy show early on, 2.5 years ago. And I had kind of made some, cracks about sort of my ex-wife, real innocent stuff, nothing too harsh. And I got off stage and she was like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you never post your comedy online? I was like, Mom, that's the whole. But she was just so nervous that in her head she saw all of our family stuff, and I was like, you're a great mother. I've got nothing to complain about with you. She's just very
That's amazing.
You got to be careful with that, but kind of makes it fun too.
So, you've had a relatively fast rise in the world of comedy, starting back in about 2021, going from doing open mics to, coming in second place in a comedy competition. You pointed it out in your blog, but, you can see the rapid increase in your abilities, from that first open mic you posted to even 6 months later. So to you, what do you feel like has been the key to your growth as a comedian?
Pure effort. I read a lot of books, and the first book I read was Judy Carter's The Comedy Bible. And then I read probably 5 or 6 other books. And what I started to realize the common theme was just the more you sit down and write, the more you have to work with and the funnier you get. If you come up with 1,000 ideas for 5 minutes of material, it's going to be so much better than coming up with 100 ideas for 5 minutes of comedy. So it's just the amount and diversity of ideas that get tossed around in your mind. And there have been some specific processes that I learned. I forget what the techniques are called, but one of them is like writing out a story from childhood, kind of long form, 1 or 2 pages, and then wait for 2 days. And then after 2 days, you come back to it and you go through. And this is something that like Scorsese and like lots of creative types swear by for all types of entertainment and creativity, plays and comedy and whatnot. So what happens is for those 48 hours, your subconscious is like mulling over that content and just in the background process. And you sleep on it and you probably dream about it. But after 2 days, when you go back into it and start asking yourself, what's funny about this? All of a sudden, like you've tapped into a lot more of the context around these stories. You've had time to let it sort of simmer. And then all of a sudden you just start shooting out these hilarious little things about it. And literally my first joke that is my opener is, I say that I was raised Mormon, and growing up with Mormon was weird because we didn't watch the same movies and TV shows. I saw Star Wars Return of the Jebediah. I saw How I Met Your Mothers. That was literally the first joke I wrote. And I could go through the exact process of it, but a lot of it was reading books, understanding there's formulas to comedy, and then just getting up on stage over and over again and sort of shedding a lot of the hard edges in your presentation, getting comfortable, realizing that everyone wants to laugh. It's not as adversarial as it feels. It's actually, we're all in this together. And as long as you come in with an attitude of we're here to laugh together, people are eager to laugh. Yeah.
That's awesome. I was going to ask if you feel like your understanding of marketing has helped you in comedy, but I think a better question, and just kind of thinking about your background, it feels like you're approaching comedy in a really entrepreneurial way.
Sure. Yeah, I'm very, I feel very aware that there are so many comedians in Houston that are way funnier than me. Like most of them are way funnier than me. I'm a better marketer than a lot of them, and so I do get a lot more opportunities because of that. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I've definitely been put on shows that I'm one of the least funny people on the show. But when I bring 80 people to a show through marketing, it's a win-win for everybody. There's more people to laugh. Nobody's upset by it, and so I've definitely kind of like eked into a few shows, and the people that book these shows are always very appreciative that I'm hustling, not just for my own performance, but also I'm hustling for their show. I'm trying to make sure that we fill the show. So that stuff is definitely appreciated by bookers. And about 7 months into comedy, I started booking my own shows because I understood the marketing, and I started meeting really funny comedians. And you take care of the people that book the shows, and then you get booked on their shows. So just kind of basic networking, marketing, understanding what everyone's motives are, and asking how you can help them when you walk into a group of people. Hey, how can I help you guys? Is this a value? Is this a value? These are my skills. And then naturally they're helping you punch up your jokes and helping you work your material and giving you career advice. So
yeah, I think that's a really, really healthy mindset. The way I sort of approach marketing is I have more to learn than anybody I'm working with. I am at the bottom of the totem pole. Let me see if I can provide any sort of value. And in return, I hope I can get a ton of value because I have the most to learn. So
that's definitely how you get the attention of people that have things to offer you is figure out what you can offer them. That gets their attention.
Absolutely. And yeah, so that's a really healthy mindset. How do you kind of approach those shows where you sort of feel like you're maybe the least funny person in the room?
I don't care. This is like, to me, um, I'm on my journey and I'm comparing myself against myself. It's like if you were to go to the gym and be like, well, I'm not the most fit guy here, so I'm not going
Hmm.
to go to the gym. Everyone has to go through that process. So I just remind myself of how far I've come. And I even tell the bookers when they're like, "Hey, do you want to be on this show?" I'm like, "Look, put me on the show if I belong on the show." Like, like I'm real open about it, and I don't want to be in a situation where like I'm opening for someone and it's this incredible imbalance of talent. Um, but if they think it's good enough, then I'll go. I don't have a lot of hangups on being a work in process or currently being a rough draft, and I'm not afraid of having a bad show. It just doesn't. I just don't let that hold me back, and I think that's probably come with age and experience, and realizing that when you fail, there's really no downside. It's
Hmm.
like it's the bombing process of comedy. It creates this sort of Teflon. You learn to not be as affected by it, and I feel like I went through that pretty pretty well, probably because I had a pretty chaotic 10 years of marriage. And so I think I had a layer of Teflon already sort of built in going into comedy. But I think that's something you just have to develop, and not overthinking it all the time, and just do your best to get up there. And if you have a good attitude about
I
it and
think,
you're humble,
I don't know if you can hear me,
I
Sean, but I think we've lost you.
can hear you.
I'm going to keep it recording because worst comes to worst, we can just pick it right back up from here.
Yeah, so I feel like every situation you go into, probably for the rest of your career, you'll be able to identify where you come short. You'll always be in situations where somebody's better, whether you're on the show with them or you're competing for internet views, right? So I think you just need to have a healthy perspective on focusing on your journey and competing with yourself. And that keeps you kind of in a healthy, keeping a healthy sort of progress step by step moving forward. Yeah, I would just focus on you, just focus on your own art and your own progress. And that's what I tend to do.
Yeah, one of the things for me, I've one of the things I've dealt with this podcast, it being framed around stand-up comedians. I obviously
Mm-hmm.
want it to have funny moments, but one of the things I encounter from my dad and a couple of friends is, but how are you going to make it funny? And my feeling is just if I put work into my main goal of the podcast is to have my guests walk away like, oh, I would recommend being on this podcast to a friend. I had a good time talking to this
Yeah,
person. And I feel like if I can accomplish that, then the rest will kind of take care of itself.
it absolutely will. I agree.
So I promise this won't be, the whole focus of the podcast, but we have to touch on, the story with the superintendent. So
I
for
love
anyone
it.
who hasn't followed this amazing story, can you give me an update on sort of where things are at this point? It looks like it's been going on for a few years and may have come to a close recently.
Where things are at, where things are at. I mean, currently there's just this sort of de- overall denial of the truth. So this last school board meeting I went to, I hadn't been to one in a while, and 3 new individuals got elected. And I like to say that we have 5 out of 7 common sense individuals on that board that have either admitted to me that what the district did was horrific, or I believe they would if they were comfortable admitting it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can just tell by the way they carry themselves. So there's been a huge power shift on the board, I've had, beers with a former school board member that voted to sue me for defamation. And boy, was that an interesting conversation.
That sounds like an interesting conversation.
Yeah. And so, I've run into these people in the wild. I ran into one of them, Rebecca Fox, at a chili cook-off here in Katy. She said she saw my TikTok and she didn't think any of it was very funny. And I said, well, I bet if I did a video about you, it would be funny. And then she immediately was like, oh my God, I think we should just get together someday and just bury the hatchet. Not today, but someday. So it's just this weird sort of ignorance of how horrific they behaved. And, these people walk around like it was no big deal. And I think that's what bothers me the most is if it's no big deal, then we're capable of doing it again. And that's what bothers me. And then on a darker note, the very school that I raised the red flags about, that I had issues in, the very school, the junior high that my son was having issues in, multiple issues. A year and a half after this whole superintendent situation, a little girl committed suicide at that school from bullying, persistent bullying. And so it's like, so frustrating. And I feel like I moved the needle a little bit, but I'm always kind of frustrated at how much evidence and facts and objective, mutually observable truth was put out there. And there's still these people with just like blinders on. So I don't know. So where we're at now, we're putting together a documentary trailer, and we'll be doing a GoFundMe here soon to raise money to produce the documentary. I have a comedy show June 29th. It's the first time I'll be in downtown Katy, like next to City Hall.
Wow.
I've invited the mayor and all the school board members that voted to sue me. I haven't heard back from the school board members, but the ex-mayor said he's going to try to come. And some school board members from other districts are going to come. And there's definitely been some people online just hating that I'm doing a little comedy show for 100 people. But so that's kind of the temperature right now.
And I realized I didn't really introduce the story. So just to give a quick summary of what happened. So, your son was being bullied in middle school. You brought it to the school board and they were not supportive. So you brought it to the superintendent who blatantly lied. And you ran his doctoral dissertation through a plagiarism checker.
As anyone would.
Absolutely. That's an amazing thing that I got to have that one in my back pocket for dealing with authority. But
it's real quick.
And then a few days later, there was the abrupt end of his 30-year career in education. So that I just want to say, like, I was personally incredibly excited to talk to you.
Awesome.
I'm dating a teacher. She's a middle school teacher. I used to work in higher education. And, one of the things we bonded about was how systematic the issues are in education.
Yeah.
And how it really feels like nobody can do anything. So, I know you mentioned you feel like maybe you just moved the needle a little bit, but you moved the needle. And that's huge.
Yeah.
So just thank you on behalf of both of us for that.
Of course. Yeah, I think one of the big things I took away, because I sort of immediately became the complaint center for Katy ISD. Like any teacher, I would get calls about abuse, calls from parents whose kids were abused and they were paid off. I was literally flagged in the middle of the street. Someone flagged me over and told me their story and how they were paid $100,000 to not talk about it. They're not allowed to talk about it. They're not allowed to tell me about it. I can't tell anyone who they are,
Wow.
And then how to check the public records to see how many people were paid off for very similar situations. And so it's like, to me, I think the needle that I feel like I moved was just a huge warning shot to anyone else who thinks they can get away with, anything full sale, that they have to maybe think twice. And to just give you an idea, there's so many of these stories, but the I forget what his title is, but it's kind of the COO, but the like vice president of maintenance and operations for the district. It's a big district. He was talking to his staff about not talking to Sean Dolan. And I got an audio recording of a staff member recording him, telling them not to talk to Sean Dolan. And then I went up to him the next day at a school board meeting and I was like, hey man, I was like, don't tell your staff not to talk to me. And he just like, just weird. So it's like I all of a sudden at least gave people like someone they could go to. And there were a lot of things that I kind of helped connect the dots on. And so, yeah, no, I appreciate that. And you know, I guess it's kind of like comedy. You can always look at what you didn't achieve or how far you have to go, but it is nice to look at how far you've come. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And this story went insanely viral. I think, you know, it received over 100 million views on TikTok and other social media platforms. Are you worried about being pigeonholed at all as, you know, the guy who took down the superintendent?
I would love that. I mean, the fact that being pigeonholed is even a conversation 2.5 years in, awesome, right? Like, you know, I am very open-minded about my journey. I had an hour conversation with the music producer for Kanye West, Beyonce, Kendrick Lamar, going back to Tupac. Okay. This guy's worked with everybody and he loved my story. And we had an hour conversation and it was just the most amazing experience to hear how the story touched him. So it's like, I'm so open-minded. So the fact that I might get pigeonholed for comedy, that's cool. I mean, it's not my bread and butter. You know, I run a digital marketing agency called Pushfire. And so a lot of times when I take my hobbies, in a lot of ways, they're use cases for my business. And I had an actor reach out to me, because he saw an actor comedian reach out to me and we've been discussing how my company can help him. So I'm really open-minded about my journey and, yeah. So,
I mean, that's awesome. And I personally fell down into a rabbit hole with the story and unfortunately saw some examples of, you know, how internet comment sections can just be incredibly toxic places, especially when it comes to viral news stories.
Yeah.
So, and reading through some of your comments, you clearly do have a lot of support. There are a lot of people who, you know, rush to kind of defend you on your behalf. But how do you deal with the negative side of virality?
So this isn't my first time. In 2009, I raised money for a homeless man in Houston. It was the first viral campaign that I did when I started my agency, when I transitioned from being a mobile DJ to offering marketing as a service. And we didn't have any case studies. And so me and my dad got together and came up with this crazy idea. And just through brute force and guerrilla marketing, we raised $100,000 for this man named Tim in Houston. Got him. He was on Fox and Friends morning show. Rachel Ray, Jeff Foxworthy made a joke about it. Yeah, it was crazy viral. Der Spiegel in Germany, front page of the new Finland economic section. Just it was wild. And our website kept crashing like every day. So I learned a lot about IT. And so, and I'll give you an example. You know, the person I helped was a white man. And so I got people calling me that were like this Baptist preacher called me and he was complaining that I didn't help a black person. And this woman called and complained I didn't help a woman. And I'm like, why don't you do that? Like what's stopping you? You know what I mean? It's like you're taking the time out of your day to call. Go, literally, they're all over the place. Help whoever you want. It's like I asked 3 guys. One happened to be black and 2 were white. And I said, any of y'all interested? And the one that stood up was the one I helped. So it's silly, but it's like there's always going to be somebody who's going to complain about something. And the book, The 4 Agreements, is one of my favorite books. And I think it's agreement number 2 is like, don't take things personally. Like most of the time, someone's problem with you has nothing to do with you. They're going through all kinds of stuff. and they're projecting their issues onto you. You know, if they're dishonest, they're going to accuse you of being dishonest. So I was accused of like not giving him the money we were raising for him. You know, obviously the person accusing of me, I would suspect, is probably not super upright, but, you know, so a lot of it's projection. And so you really just have to, well, two things. You got to focus on the positive. And then two, you have to moderate how much of the negativity you allow in. And so I will go through some times where I just emotionally feel overexposed. I think for TikTok, I got like 82,000 followers in maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Wow. And it was like hundreds of thousands of comments, maybe 700,000 comments. I don't remember, just hundreds of thousands of comments. And I was trying to comment to everything. It was nuts. And like everything and just be very engaging and answer questions on video. And it just got to this point where I felt overexposed. And so I just took a break from it for a while, and then Instagram took off and I was like, all right, I feel good. So you definitely have to like listen to your body and your mind, and you're not going to change anyone's opinion. Most of the people coming at you negatively without the story are not people whose minds are going to change, because they didn't come to their conclusion with evidence. So they're not the type of people that care about evidence. They're working out from their conclusion. And so I think once you learn that, you don't take it so personally. But the Four Agreements is a really good book for that if anyone's dealing with how to handle the negativity that comes on the end. I mean, it's not even viral. Just pick any Facebook page, right?
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think about the most quote unquote viral I ever went. At the beginning of the pandemic, I noticed that there was that Reddit was putting a lot of money behind their streaming platform because they realized everyone was sitting around doing nothing all day, looking for something to watch. So I went on their streaming platform one day and started playing some original music. And I looked up after my second song, and there was 100,000 people in the audience.
Wow.
So I learned a lot of things that day. If you have 100,000 people watching you online, that could be a very, very fleeting thing. So in the amount of time it took me to react to those people being on my stream, I had lost like 30,000 viewers. So immediately, you know, go back to playing some music and all this stuff, and got 10,000 comments or something like that. And I still to this day, one of the only comments I can remember is, why does his hair look like that? And, you know, like, it was just like, that stuck with me. It was that my brain really wants to grasp on to those negative things. And like, I can't tell you another comment. I know I had lots of positive ones, but why does his hair look like that? To this day, I can just remember thinking, well, why did they say that? And what do they mean? Like,
right. There's a lot of ambiguity to that. And that leaves you to fill in the blanks, which are infinite. There's infinite blanks you could fill in for that. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I would recommend to you to read the Four Agreements. It's it's a short read, and it just kind of helps reframe sort of how you see the world and how malleable your life is. And when you look towards and focus on the good, and focus on your goals, and you don't let the minutia of negativity pull you down. I'll give you an example. The guy Tim that we helped get off the street. He told me a story one time. He was reading the newspaper. He's a very, very smart guy, very well read. And he's reading the newspaper one day, sitting on the side of the road with a bunch of buddies outside. And he read this story about, I think it was Iran, how people in Iran were just drug off the street and murdered. And he was like, it's pretty nice being homeless in the US. So like, as a homeless person on the street, he was seeing the positive of his situation and having gratitude that if you're going to be homeless, this is a pretty great place to be homeless. So I always remember that. It's always stuck in me. Like, so when you hear these negative comments, it's like, someone about your hair or whatever, you get 100,000 people watching you like that. Like, most people will never get that in their entire lives. Absolutely. So to let that just hair, that one tiny piece of sand on the whole beach, affect you. I get it. But I think if you pull out, kind of pull back on it, it is kind of silly for us to let that bother us. But it's totally normal. We all do it.
Yeah. one of the things I followed these YouTube creators for a while that were talking to, they say people reach out to them all the time and they say like, only 1,000 people watch my videos. Only 5,000 people watch my videos. And a trick that they taught me to sort of take that in a better, think of that in a better way is like, think of what it would take to fit that many people. So like, how many buses of people is that? How many, like for me, 100,000 people, that would have filled OSU's football stadium. That's where I went to school. So for me to picture like, that's me standing on the field with every seat filled. It's
a dream.
It's a dream. It's something that only people like legends get to do. And I got to experience that for an hour one day in the pandemic. So it's crazy.
Yeah. I like to Google pictures of that many people. So if you have like 500,000 or 100,000, like Google that. Google will show you exactly how many that is in a crowd.
It's absurd. How did the feeling of, having this particular story blow up compare to landing Fame?
So Fame was a reality show in 2003 that I was on. I turned 18 on the show. They made a cake for me, which was really sweet. I celebrated my 18th birthday with Joey Fantone from NSYNC, which was crazy. And Justin Timberlake came by to see Joey, which was crazy because I was a huge NSYNC fan. I sang Justin's song on the show, and that was the song I picked to sing, despite everyone telling me to sing something else, which may have been why I didn't win. But it was a cool experience. Very different. I mean, that was like, as a child, I was in talent shows in high school. I did not focus on academics. I focused on my next performance. That was kind of what I focused on. So I taught dance to the cheerleaders to get out of PE class because I didn't want to wear smelly shorts. It's very creative. And she was like, what are you going to teach them? I was like, whatever you want me to, I'll teach them whatever. And so she's like, all right, Monday you're teaching. And I got out of PE. So I studied this like VMA performance, 1999 VMA performance. And I was just going to figure it out. So anyway, that's what I did. And so Fame was sort of this wake up call to me. I realized I had no control, I was certainly not the most talented person on that show by far. I mean, people went on, the second place contestant, Shannon Beck's good friend of mine, went on to be in Danity Kane, and she was on making the band with P. Diddy. And then everyone else they're just so talented. And my big realization when I left the show was that I wanted to be on the producer side. Like I watched the producers come in, they called all the shots, they made all the decisions, and I was at their mercy. And so as I left, I was like, no, like I don't want to be the talent. I want to be the business owner. I want to be the person in control. And that's when things definitely shifted towards entrepreneurship and business ownership. And then,
that's awesome.
And so with this, I'm at a point in my life where being a business owner, entrepreneur is my main, it's my source of income. It pays all my bills, and comedy is this very fun, long-term strategy of see what happens. And along the way, even like this show that I'm having, June 29th in Katy, I'm inviting important people to the show to benefit Pushfire, people that I'm courting, people that I want to work with. So it's just this very cool kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like a power move. It's like this very cool way to build trust with somebody, like, hey, I'm doing this show, come check it out. Or they come see me at the Houston Improv and then they want to do business with me. I mean, comedy is such a kind of it's just a really good way to connect with people. And it lets down a lot of like walls with people. And so once they see me get up there and kind of joke around, make a fool of myself, I can laugh at myself. It just kind of tells you a lot about a person. And then I've gotten a lot of business out of it. So, so in that way, it's definitely Fame set me on the path so that now I'm not getting overly maybe obsessed with sort of the fame side of things and letting go of what keeps me grounded. So I'm definitely coming from what keeps me grounded. And as opportunities and shows come, I take them. And like if someone books me to tour with a guy and it's the week I have my son, I'll say no. Right. So I have a real healthy balance with I think with my career as a comedian.
That's awesome. You touched on it a little bit in your answer there, but do you feel like learning comedy has helped you in your professional career?
Definitely. I remember I've always been very outgoing and extroverted, but I never quite understood what was going on in other people's brains until I started doing comedy. I always felt like, and maybe this comes from my upbringing in like a very conservative, Mormon upbringing. I always felt like everyone's very different, and what I think is funny, they might not think is funny, or what I think is appropriate, they might not think is appropriate. And through comedy, it kind of broke down the barriers between me and everyone else that I like, strangers, in that like everyone thinks farting is funny, like everyone, so there's just certain things that no matter where you are, you can identify with strangers. And so I noticed after doing comedy for maybe 5 to 6 months, I just walked around with a greater connection with strangers. I'd for instance, I'd be in line at Starbucks and the person in front of me would be like, here's $5 for your great smile, talking to the barista. And I'd be like, what about my smile? Just like, I'll just insert myself into, and everyone laughs because it's funny. Like, it's a little funny what I'm saying, but it's way more funny because I'm breaking that sort of social boundary, Yeah. And so you just start to learn that like everyone's human. Most people, generally have a sense of humor. And the worst thing that could happen is they don't laugh. And that's not so bad. You learn that that's not so bad. And even if I said that and it bombed, I would still laugh because I know it's funny. And I don't need them to laugh for me to know it's funny. So it definitely changed the way I communicated with people, and it made life so much more fun.
Absolutely. And I think even, I haven't even performed yet, but just even 9 months ago when I started trying to pay more attention to the things around me that I thought were funny, to write ideas and stuff down. For me, I feel like I've been coming at life with just a slightly different viewpoint since I started writing this stuff down.
Yeah, there's that like comedic eye that it's as simple as asking yourself what's funny about this. Or if you're in a group of people and something is funny, like writing down what was said to think about later. Because almost every time somebody laughs at something, about something, there's a joke there. There's an essence of something that if you can find a way to share not just what was said, but the context around it, there's a lot. So there's so much funny. I agree. Like everywhere you go, there's something funny. And the moment you decide to pay attention to it, you're just sort of like, I don't know, you're just catching it in the air sort of. So that's a cool perspective to have shift.
So just to kind of wrap up the Sean Dolan side of things, one of the things we have in common is just having done as many different creative projects in our life as we could possibly get our hands on. Like I said earlier, you were a DJ. I've seen you strumming around on your guitar on stage and doing some piano and stuff. You do improv on top of comedy. Is there any creative endeavor that you haven't tried that you still want to?
I'm not a great painter. My mom and I are going to a sip and paint class next week. So, I mean, so this is like my favorite book recently is John Cleese's Creativity.
Amazing.
You should read it. So good. Super short. And he talks about how some of their best skits they ever made for Monty Python were started out as not great ideas. And he talks about how you have to have a room of people that are open to letting bad ideas breathe. Almost because if it was such an easy, good idea, it would have been taken. And if it starts out kind of rough and you're able to dig through that and find the gold, it ends up being like a diamond. And so one of his greatest skits was Silly Walks. Have you ever seen that by Monty Python? Right.
Yeah.
The premise is
that's exactly
there's a department of silly walks, and this guy walks to it to pitch his silly walk, and the guy's like, well, let's see your silly walk. And he gets up and does his silly walk, and he's like, it's not very silly, is it? He's like, well, that's why I need the money. I need to develop it. You know? So like, and then he asks for a drink, and the woman comes in to bring a drink, and she's walking silly. It's on paper, it's the dumbest idea in the world, right? Like anyone cynical in a group of people would have killed that idea. But what he says is great about Monty Python is there are no bad ideas. Anything is potential. And you play it out. Maybe you don't find anything, but you allow it to breathe. And so to me, it's like music to me, writing to me, anything where I'm like getting in kind of in tune with the moment, my subconscious, and building something and putting it together. Right now I'm writing a few songs. I've been invited to go out and meet with the producer I mentioned before. I pitched him on, I saw that he liked my video, and I messaged him and I said, hey, if you're ever interested in doing a fuck around and find out rap song, I'm your guy. And he goes, that's actually not a bad idea. So we're actually going to go and with his whole team, see what happens. Right. So, I don't know, man. I can't think of anything like I want to do that I haven't done. It just tickles my brain to create stuff. And so comedy's fun, piano's fun, guitar's fun. Like my son last night, we were making a song together, and we decided on writing a song about trying to write a song. And the chorus is like, I'm never going to write this song. so, you know, I'm open to anything, but I can't really think of something that I really want to do that I haven't, but I'm open to ideas.
Yeah, that's awesome. I sort of feel like I've just recently given into my, like, I'm going to try everything I haven't at this point.
Totally.
So, yeah. Finally have some funds to pour into stupid projects. So
I love it, dude. That's life, man. Like that's mental health. That's a balanced life. You know, you gotta really explore what's inside of you and see what comes out and through whatever medium.
Yeah. I'm gonna move on from me talking about myself too much, but just keep thinking about all the different projects I'm working on. I feel like we have a lot in common in that regard.
Yeah.
So at this point, this sort of wraps up the Sean Dolan specific questions. So we're going to move into what I like to call talking comedy. And I'm just going to try and get an idea of what, pushed you into the world of comedy. Hello, everybody. I hope you're having half as much fun listening to this podcast as I had making it. That wraps up the getting to know you portion of the podcast. And before we start talking comedy, I want to remind everyone to go check out 4x3. They drop awesome original comedy content every week on their YouTube channel, youtube.com/FOURXTHREE. Or you can find it by looking up 4x3 on YouTube. Let's get back to the show. So what did you want to be when you were a kid?
Trauma plastic surgeon or jet pilot.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Nope. It's written down in a scrapbook because my mom asked me that when I was like 5.
Where did you come up with trauma plastic surgeon?
I think my dad mentioned it. It would be cool, or he always wanted to be it, something like that. And then jet pilot was just like, I'm a little kid, I'm a boy, and that was like the coolest thing I could think of.
I was about to say jet pilot definitely fits that sort of firefighter policeman mold, but the trauma plastic surgeon is definitely a unique one.
Yeah, very specific. Yeah.
What made you decide to bite the bullet and try comedy?
So my 3 brothers, there's 3 of us, my 2 brothers. have always talked about doing comedy. We love comedy and we share comedy clips. And we're like, man, okay, so we got to commit. Like this year, we're going to do our first open mic. Okay, we're going to do it. And then none of us did it. And then my youngest brother, Hiram, actually did it and shared it with the family. And I'm like, oh, so there was that. That motivated me to try it. And then I went through a really difficult 10 years of marriage and a subsequent 3 years of divorcing with children involved. And so that was very difficult. You know, first time I'd been away from my son half the time. We're 50-50. And so like, it's just miserable not being with him every other week. And so I was like, man, I got to get out of the house. I got to do something. Then I saw a documentary on the Comedy Store, and I just kind of like, man, that's a cool community of people. There's like an honesty to it. There's an authenticity to it, a vulnerability. And I'm like, I would love to hang out with these kind of people. So I went downtown, went to an open mic, watched it, met a guy, asked him like for some advice. He kind of took me under his wing. His name's Rich Williams, sweetheart of a guy. He told me where to go for my first open mic. And then Judy Carter's book said like chapter 1 was put a date on the calendar. And so that's when I went to him. I was like, hey, where should I go? And I put a date on the calendar. And I'm telling you, the moment you put a date on your calendar, it's just like setting a goal. Your brain is now oriented towards that day. I did it. So I do like Ironmans and triathlons and stuff. And yeah. And so the first one I signed up for, the first marathon I signed up for, the moment I signed up for it, I started running more. Because instead of chasing like a sort of ambiguous goal, you're now thinking, if I'm not prepared for this day, it's going to suck. Mm-hmm. Right? If I don't write something funny, it's going to suck. So now you're sort of motivated to not suck, to not have a painful experience. And I think that avoiding pain is a huge driver. And so that's what happened. I set the date and I memorized my material. I set it in front of the blinds in my apartment at the time and just memorized it. And then I got up and I delivered it and I remembered all the parts and I got a few laughs. And that was like, it felt like skydiving. Like I don't know. It's just this very exciting, intense feeling and, very supportive group of comedians in the room. Before and after, super excited to watch me do my first time. And so it was like, it was the community I'd hoped it would be. And it continues to be. And like, I love a lot of these comedians. I mean, you see these guys like every night. I love booking them for my shows. Like Mason James is going to be on my show. I love booking that guy. He's hilarious. And he's come so far, and it's like, and I can see some of these people that like, they're going to be big. It's just a matter of time and the right person connecting them. So it's a really rewarding, hobby / career, however serious you want to make it.
Yeah, that's, that's something that I really, really hope I get to do at some point. Like more than wanting really any amount of success in comedy. Yeah. I would like to help introduce people who are really, really driven towards making this their career, get to the right spots. Yeah. Like I want to do comedy for me. I'm kind of in the same way as I've felt my own personal development, and I've felt just sort of a morale boost from doing this and having this mindset.
Have you felt like you've come out of your shell, like socially, and like what's been that change for you?
It's interesting. So I never really felt like I had a shell. I almost let too much out. So for me, it's almost been building a sort of a filter like shell, which is like, I'm someone who used to feel like I needed to dominate the room in terms of conversation. I felt like I had to be the one talking, and comedy has sort of taught me to be within myself, be within my head, and wait for those moments where instead of trying to talk all night to be entertaining, throw out your couple of jokes you've thought of and wait for your moments, and just sort of, the interaction is not for you. Go into the interaction thinking, maybe I can make these people laugh a few times. And it's just kind of helped me calm down and be less. It's weird. It's a weird mixture of being less in my head and more in my head, because I'm more in my head in terms of what I'm letting out, but I'm less in my head in terms of how I'm being perceived. Because instead of talking the whole time, I just had a few moments that I know got a reaction and that I know people appreciated because they laughed.
Yep. Yeah. I think Shakespeare said brevity's the soul of wit. And, when you kind of learn to be more of a sniper in a conversation than like a shotgun approach, and be more thoughtful and like punch up what you're going to say instead of just, it's interesting. And also I learned in improv, lead with your foot is what they say. So like the moment you put your foot forward, sometimes it's even funnier, if you don't wait. So it's just a very interesting thing about figuring out like what's funny. Because ultimately nobody really knows exactly why things are funny. We have a bunch of theories on it. So that kind of makes it an ever exciting journey to sort of figure out and nail it down. But that's cool, man. That's I'm excited to see your journey and see your first 5 minutes. You said you're going to post it, because that's always like,
I'm gonna. So one of the things is I want this to be as authentic of a depiction of what it feels like to start comedy as possible. So
I love it.
Whether I have new jokes or I'm just gonna go out and wing it, I'm gonna post that 5 minute set. I might not post every single thing, but
I was going to say, give yourself permission not to post it until after. You know what I mean? Like, because you don't want to be in your head while you're up there. Like a lot of people, I'm not this way, but a lot of people have said that anytime they're recording, they just suck. Like anytime that they know they're being recorded, they don't do as well because it gets in their head. So maybe if you're a first one, just tell yourself it doesn't have to be posted. And then afterwards you can totally decide, whether you do or not. Just to get, I don't know, maybe just to give yourself a little less pressure on that first one, but
at the very
I'm sure you'll do great.
Thank you. Yeah. One of the things that's been a crazy thing that I'm doing, because it's not the right context for stand up at all, but I actually go out on like random chat websites and I will force myself to do like a minute of my routine for someone. And I've noticed that like I've gotten people to laugh, and that's a huge confidence boost. But almost more important than that confidence boost, I've experienced people looking at me telling my jokes, not laughing, and then afterwards saying, I didn't think that was funny. And, to each his own. I didn't take that too hard, but I got to experience what that gut punch feels like in the comfort of my own home.
It's not going to happen at an open mic with a bunch of comedians. Like, I mean, assuming it's not just a really negative group, but generally like they're eager to laugh for you, with you, or even because it's awkward to laugh a little bit. Like there's a lot of things usually going for you, especially if it's your first time, and let a few people know it's your first time, and it'll be great. Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone about to do their first open mic?
Make sure you have it memorized. There is a panic button that kind of creeps up. It's your fight or flight, because, as humans, we have our monkey brains that are looking for the tiger that's going to eat us. And when you get up on stage, for whatever reason, it sometimes feels like the community of apes is deciding whether they kill you or not. That's how it feels. And so your monkey brain starts going like, oh shit, they're going to kill me if I don't make them laugh. And if you let that overcome you, then all the blood goes to your legs to run away, and it goes away from your brain, which you'll need for the jokes. And so that's so it's just like breathe, memorize. If you have it memorized, also like from one joke to the next, it's really easy to memorize like a full joke once you start, but that transition from the end to the beginning of the next one, that's where you can kind of get lost. And I still will sometimes, and I'll be like, all right, how's everyone doing? And just have like a filler. All right, this is a great crowd or whatever to fill that. But what I'll do is I'll literally say the two words, like the last word and the first word, just over and over and over and over and over again, just so I have that really tight lock between. And then don't like once you memorize your 5 minutes, don't move the jokes around, figure out the order. Even if you think there's a better order, I would say for your first five, just keep that order, because that's where sort of you might get lost. But there's moments that I've thought like, oh, I might not, I don't remember. And then I just kind of like calm myself and it comes. But if you panic, it won't. So, and then, yeah, I like this one time I was competing in a contest. I think I tied for third place and I did 8 minutes of material, which is the most, that's how much I had. And they announced that I tied. And they're like, we're going to do a sudden death of 3 minutes. And I was like,
no.
I'm sorry, what did you say? 3 minutes? And so I went up there and I went first and I got up there and I just broke the ice with like, well, I just called out what was happening. I said, well, I've got 8 minutes of material and you guys have heard all 8 of it. So this is going to be a really awkward 3 minutes for the both of us. And that got a laugh, like an awkward release of tension. And then all of a sudden my subconscious just tossed up these 2 jokes that I used to say and I stopped saying. And that took my 3 minutes and it went great. So the lesson is just like stay calm. If you get in a situation where you're like stumbling or you're stammering, just identify it. Be like, oh, I didn't know I stuttered. It'll get a laugh. Like just go easy on yourself, have fun. But the biggest thing is just make sure you have that memorized as much as you can and get those transitions locked in. And then if something happens, just call it out and laugh at yourself and it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's something that, for me, when I wrote, I wrote out probably 10 to 15 minutes worth of quote unquote material. And then
Perfect.
What I had to do was like say maybe 1 in 5 of these paragraphs are usable. And so I just started, cutting holes in things, saying this last sentence of this paragraph is good. I'll put it at the end of this thing. And it's interesting that you mentioned not moving it around because that's something that I've really had to put a conscious effort into is I'm going out and I'm getting some feedback on this set. So
future special.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
For me, it's hard to not want to take that feedback immediately, but sure. At the same time, I think there's no better feedback than like your friends are going to give you a certain level of feedback, but strangers are going to give you much more honest feedback eventually. So
sometimes, yeah. I think all feedback is good. Can be good, can also be bad, and so I've always just kind of. You just try it out, you try it out a few times. But I will say all the effort that goes into the first 5 minutes is like the most effort you'll ever put into your set, right? Because from then on, like I'll think of something on the way to just driving to an open mic and I'll be like, oh my gosh, that would be interesting. And then I'll say it and it's, 50-50 whether it works. But having that freedom to kind of throw things together and not feel like it is like a finished product makes it really fun. So it's not always going to be this chaotic or this stressful. The process becomes really, really exciting when you can just sort of off the cuff or even think of things on the spot or, start doing like some crowd work even just makes it a lot of fun. So it's going to be a fun adventure ahead of you.
Yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to crowd work because that is something that I do feel like I know I'm not going to hit the mark every time, but just in terms of conversational, like thinking of random things, like thinking of jokes my brain didn't know it had inside. I think that's the situation.
Yeah.
I feel like I can rise to the occasion for that.
Also on that note, there's a guy named Mike Rao who headlined at a show I opened. And he got up and he did 45 minutes of crowd work. And there's probably like 100 people there. And he crowd worked every person there, including me. And after the show, I was like, Mike, like, how do you do that? Like, how do you, like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10, but like 45 minutes of just everything. I said, how do you come up with that off the top of your head? He said, I don't. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I've got 100 crowd work bits. I just find out which people in the crowd fit.
That's like, amazing.
It's preparation.
I never even thought of it like that.
I know, it's magic. It's a magic trick. There's a trick. There's, he didn't really pull a rabbit out of a hat,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for you, what's the most challenging aspect of comedy?
Justifying the opportunity cost of time spent not at my business.
Mm-hmm.
So driving to like out of the city for an hour and a half and making $40 and not selling any merch, and then so that's the tough one for me. And it's like such a great problem to have. But that's kind of where I struggle, is like finding that balance and keep, continuing to put in the effort towards the craft and balancing sort of what pays the bills with that, and seeing the eventual potential for the career, and also not knowing exactly what that looks like, and just sort of having faith in the process and enjoying it along the way. There's been a couple things I've had. Some local comedians are not super thrilled about me getting as much attention as I am early. And so kind of like trying to understand where they're coming from, which I feel like I do, but also not, they don't dictate my career. But I respect it. Like, I respect people doing this for a long time that haven't got the attention they deserve. And I don't think less of them. I think they do deserve the attention. And frankly, if those people would come to me and be like, hey, how can I better market myself? I'd be happy to sit down with them for as long as it took to share what I know from the marketing side. So there's been a couple of those things that are just kind of downers, because I try to be very like abundance mentality, and there's plenty for everybody. And I don't think when it comes to comedy, there's not a finite amount of people that we're all fighting for. There are millions of people watching Netflix at night that should be at a comedy show. And so I feel like if we all work together and put on just, 1,000 amazing shows instead of fighting over 1 or 2 or 3 gigs in a city or whatever, like there's an abundance of opportunity to get people out to shows, and whatever it takes to get them out there, I think is a good thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about this sort of growing market for pop-up shows like Don't Tell Comedy and stuff like that. I went to a comedy show in the back room of a bar. It was a 100 people.
Super cool.
And I got to meet the first 2 comedians that I interviewed through on this podcast by going to that show, just because it was a really low key show, and they were absolutely hilarious. There is so many good comedians right now. I think a lot of the comedians I've spoken to have just talked about, how saturated things really are right now. But there is a certain community that's built from that saturation, and there's niches and pockets for everyone to sort of fit into in comedy. And I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Pave your own way.
So we're going to start to wrap up here. I just have a couple more questions. Thanks again for being on the podcast. It's been wonderful having you, Sean.
Likewise. Yeah.
What do you love about comedy?
I love the honesty of it. Sort of my, I guess some of the trauma that I experienced in my life was a lot of like gaslighting and, so I enjoy sort of the honesty of comedy and the meritocracy. Unless you're stealing jokes, there's no real cheating, like, with the school board stuff, the fact that I was like telling the truth, but the school board was literally printing that in the Houston Chronicle that I was lying, was just so frustrating. Like, to the point where I would carry the dissertations around with me in my trunk in case anyone wanted to actually look at it. It was just such a weird, and I had people yelling at me in public in front of my kids, telling me to go F myself. And, because they believed that I was making it up, because why would the school lie? Yeah. It took 1.5 years for U of H to finally finish the investigation. So I think with a lot of that, there was something very that I appreciated about I will live or die based on my efforts and my efforts alone. And then also being around a group of people that are constantly very vulnerable and very brave creates a very open and loving environment and very positive. I mean, there's very few negative people that I've run into in comedy. And I just remember sitting in a green room at Secret Group, maybe a year into comedy. It was on one of my first showcases. And I was looking around the room and I was like, wow, it was like a Jewish person, a transgender woman, a little person, a Black person, Hispanic person, an Indian person, and everyone was making fun of everybody. It was just this loving group of diverse people, and everyone was in the same boat. Everyone was experiencing the same thing together. Everyone was nervous about getting up, and so I really like the togetherness that it brings. And I think that comes through even in the shows. It brings people together. So definitely the connection and community is something that I really appreciate about comedy.
I think that level of community, the comedians I've spoken to so far have just spoken with such love about that community. And it's interesting. There's not really other situations where, as mean as anyone gets with what their words are, everyone has the same goal, which is to make you laugh. And it can just help you take anything that's said less seriously, I think, in a really healthy way.
It does. Yep. I agree.
Do you hate anything about comedy?
No, man. I mean, I make it what I want it to be, I mean, it is fun when you produce your own shows. You get to pick your own people. Like, I know kind of the audience that's coming in Katie, like Katie proper, it's like historic Katie. It's so to me, it's like I've cleaned it up. I've gotten cleaner comedians. I mean, so my mom will go mostly. My dad's down for whatever, but my mom's like, she's like, it's the grotesque stuff I don't like. And so I brought in some people that were a little more PG-13 and R than NC-17. So yeah, no, there's nothing I hate about it, man. It's, you make it what you want. You can kind of find the people you like. And, yeah, it's, I can't think of anything I hate about comedy.
That's awesome. What's the most valuable piece of advice you've received from a fellow comedian?
So probably two things. There's a well-known comedian that I got in touch with on Instagram due to my stuff going viral. And I had just received kind of this public comment about, I need to stop doing shows. It's too early for me to get paid for shows, all this stuff. And I take all feedback and consider it. And, I ran it by this guy who's been in the business for like 30 years. And he said that guy, I don't want to say what he said. He said not to listen to that guy. And so that was just a nice, okay, good. So that was just a nice, additional piece of feedback and kind of gave me some perspective on that. Because here's the thing. I always tell my son this. My son's like, somebody was telling him something about money. And I said, is that person rich? And he said, no. I said, don't listen to them about money. Don't take financial advice from broke people, So the same thing, it's like when you take advice from the people that look like what you want to do. They're doing what you want to do. And everyone's got a different path. Some people are playing checkers, some people are playing chess. And so that was a good piece of advice for me. The other one was, like Jesse Payton, he's a guy that's taken me under his wing, booked me on a lot of shows at Houston Improv. He's the reason I've been performing at Houston Improv. He's really smart with the business. He told me like he's just a really nice guy. And when he sees talent that he thinks will be successful, he's a very good mentor and kind of walks you along the way. And so he told me that I needed to make one of my songs into a song. And so I did. He taught me all about merchandising. You know, I started doing merch, sold like $500 worth of merch the first time. And I was like, okay, well that changes things a little bit. You know, when I was making like $20-$50 for the show, but now probably profit maybe $200. So yeah, those are probably the two things that stick out. And then gosh, like Rich Williams was just a source of a lot of good advice. You know, just focusing on your craft, you know, and putting in the work and being disciplined about writing. So those are what stick out for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that really does come down to the mindset of things. You know, it's
sure.
Focus on yourself. If you were to teach a comedy workshop, what would you focus on?
Well, I'd hire someone else to do it. I'd sit in the front row and we'd split 50-50 the revenue.
You really are a businessman.
Maybe 70-30. I don't know. We'll talk. Yeah, I mean, I'd be too early to teach it. I could definitely teach a comedy marketing workshop. There are some just little itty bitty things that will make a difference between 7,000 views on TikTok and 10 million views on TikTok. And that is just cutting out the fat. And whatever you think needs to stay, question it, because it might not. Like, take it out and see if it actually needed to be there. Like, did you need to repeat that twice? Do you need the laughter? Nope, you don't need the laughter. That's probably what I would teach a class on. Yeah. But yeah, if I have someone, a gun to my head and I had to teach a class, it would probably be on tapping into your subconscious and the process of being open and dedicating time. There's a book called The Artist's Way by somebody Cameron. Thinking Jules Cameron, I believe. And it talks about like having every morning doing writing 2 to 3 pages a day. Seinfeld has like a calendar and he writes an X every single day. Yeah. Exactly. So she is just a little more formulaic with it. It's this process of unloading all of your thoughts, like what you ate yesterday, all these thoughts. But for comedy, it's brilliant because it just records all of the potential funny in a place for you to like then look at it and sort of draw lines and brainstorm what can be said from there. So that's where I would focus, is probably on the writing side.
That makes sense. All right, Sean. Well, my final question for you today: if you could have any job in the world of comedy, what would it be?
Any job in the world of comedy, I think it would be I really enjoy bringing people up. I've got a former employee of Pushfire who was living in like 3rd Ward and had no running water. I'm actually interviewing him for my podcast this week to tell a story. Has multiple sclerosis. His youngest brother died in a house fire.
Oh, wow.
He's blind in one eye. And so I hired him, and he, within a year, bought his mom a car, bought them a new house, got him out of 3rd Ward, right? So that's so fulfilling for me to teach people skills that improve their lives. And so in comedy, I'd probably see myself in like a club owner situation where I'm helping facilitate and helping manage careers, making connections, putting on shows, customer service first. Like that would be definitely the business side of running a comedy club would be something that I would really enjoy. I don't know what the money looks like on that, but that's, within the realm of comedy, that's where I would see myself.
That's awesome. Well, I think you're well on your way, Sean. Sean, if you want to remind us what you've got going on over the next month or so, any big shows, any social media you want to promote?
Yeah. So big show, June 29th in the heart of Katy, Texas. I think we have maybe 60 tickets left, 25G general admission tickets. So that's my big push right now. You can go to fathofashion.com to buy my fuck around and find out t-shirts. And then on TikTok, I'm Dolan Comedy. On Instagram, the Sean Dolan. And on YouTube, I'm at Love What You Do, but the O in love is a 0. And I'm going to be putting out some really interesting podcast interviews coming up shortly. And you can follow me at those places.
That's awesome. Thanks again, Sean. This was a pleasure to have you on.
Awesome to be here. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it.